Uh,
We didn't get involved in that until it became a united country.
yeah,
And when Germany became united, they said they were very intent on getting into the game of acquiring colonies in Africa and Asia and elsewhere.
imperialism. Yeah, trying to get into the imperialism game.
Of course, they got in late, so that's why they inevitably clash with the French and the Germans because the French and the British, because France and Britain were there first.
Yeah,
Germany was late. Japan was late. That's
yeah. Japan got into it at the very, very end,
yeah,
and it's because they got in at the very end, we look at their contributions to imperialism as beyond the pale because, you know, World War II happened. But if you look at what they did on the Korean Peninsula and China, it's no different than what Europe did to Africa.
yeah,
I mean, why Africa is such a ruin all the way up to till today is because they were basically had Nazi-like policies, you know. Um, and if you really want to split hairs, you go back to England where they depopulated Scotland in order to replace the Scots with sheep in paddocks.
yeah.
And when I say sheep, I mean real sheep, like literally. Um, yeah. So
People.
we have a long and bloody history.
Mhm.
And anyone watching on the YouTube, hey, you know, uh,
You never know.
right?
I've never seen anybody alive.
No. Where did we leave off?
We're starting,
Oh.
I think, specifically on
Mm.
the history of the Earth.
Mm. Yeah, I know Jim wrote it down, but then you all posted some AI content,
Yeah.
I
and so we
posted
got
nothing.
278. Okay.
277, 278. Yeah,
I'm just saying the royal we, you know, not
yeah.
single anybody out. Uh, no, we're all good. Okay, geological nature. Fun.
Yeah, we can go through that first.
Did we do this before?
Yeah, but I mean, it's just sort of starting off the section, so I might as well.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah, we
short.
might as well. Yep, 338. The first organism, just because it is at first determined as immediate organism or as only implicitly, does not exist as a living creature. For as subject and process, life is essentially a self-mediating activity. Consider Considered from the standpoint of subjective life, the first moment of particularization is that the organism makes itself into its own presupposition, in this way giving itself the form of immediacy in which it sets itself over against its condition at outer subsistence. The inwardization of the idea of nature within itself to subject vitality, and still more to spiritual vitality, is the judgment or partition of the idea into itself and into this processless processless immediacy. This immediate totality, presupposed by the subjective totality, is only the shape of the organism, the earth body, as the universal system of individual bodies. And we talked about this before. Um, and in the chemical process, the earth is already present as this totality. The universal elements enter into the particular corporealities of the totality and are partly causes, partly effects of the process. But this movement is only abstract because the corporealities are only particular. Now, the earth, it is true, is totality, but because it is only implicitly the process of these bodies, the process falls outside of its product, which is perpetually renewed. Yeah. As regards the content, none of the determinations belonging to life may be lacking, but as they exist outside of one another, the infinite form of subjectivity is lacking. The earth, thus presupposed by life as its own basis, is posited as not posited, for the positing is concealed by the immediacy. The next stage then is that this presupposition resolves itself. We talked about this before. That, if you look at the Earth from space, you can't really see what's on the Earth specifically that's living, but the Earth is still its preposition, so on and so forth. And so I'm just going to keep reading into 339 because this starts the history of the Earth, if that's all right. And actually, we started in on this. Yeah, we did. Members of this merely implicit organism do not therefore contain the life process within themselves and constitute an external system whose forms exhibit the unfolding of an underlying idea, but whose process of formation lies in the past. Yeah, I read this before.
Yeah.
The powers behind this process, which nature leaves behind as self-subsistences, beyond the Earth are the connection of the Earth with the solar system and its position therein, its solar, lunar, and cometary life, the inclination of its axis to the orbit, and the magnetic axis. Standing in closer relationship to these axes and their polarization is the distribution of sea and land, the compact spreading of the land in the north, the division and sharp tapering of the parts toward the south, and then the separation into an old and a new world, and the further division of the former into continents distinguished from one another and from the new world by their physical, organic, and anthropological character, to all of which is joined a continent even younger and more immature than the new world, mountain ranges, etc.
Some of the, if I was reading the second Zuzats, ended up being like some Earth was kind of formed by the magnetic axis, and then the kind of the erosion by water kind of concept at the time, which, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I think he compares, yeah, right now between the animal concrete form and the abstract form here.
Yeah.
I guess again, that's there for the abstract universal and the concrete universal. Whereas the powers behind the process appear as self-subsistent over and against their product, the animal in its own self-process has its powers within itself. Its members are the potencies of its process. The Earth, on the other hand, is merely this, that it has such and such place in the solar system, occupies a place in the series of planets. But in the animal, the whole is present in each member and consequently in the soul. Spatial asunderness is sublated. The soul is omnipresent in its body. But to speak this way is against to postulate a spatial relationship, which, however, is not the true relationship of the soul. The soul is everywhere present. It is true, but undivided, not as in sunderance. But the members of the geological organism are, in fact, outside of one another and therefore without soul. The earth is the most excellent of all the places, the mean, the individual. This its existence it owes solely to the permanent togetherness of its moments. If one of these were lacking, the earth would cease to be what it is. The earth appears as the dead product, but it is preserved by all these conditions which constitute a single chain, one whole. Because the earth is universal in dual, such moments as magnetism, electricity, and the chemical process are manifested, each in its freedom and independence in the meteorological process. The animal, on the other hand, is no longer magnetism, and electricity is subordinate phenomena in it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, if you think about how the brain works and the electricity in the brain, it's part and parcel
Which I
to
think
it.
animal electricity was still a concept at the time, so that's makes sense why he could put that together.
Yeah.
Even I don't think he agreed with it. At least, yeah, there was something to it.
Yeah. The process of formation then is not in the earth itself, simply because this is not a living subject. Therefore, the earth does not come to be through this process, to come to be through this process as does the living creature. It endures, it does not produce itself. For the same reason, the earth's members also endure, and this is no advantage. The living creature, on the other hand, has the advantage of coming to be and passing away. As an individual, the living creature is a manifestation of the of the genus, but it is also in conflict with the genus, which manifests itself through the destruction of the individual. Process of the earth, insofar as the earth exists for itself as a universal individual, is as such only an inner necessity, for the process is present only in principle and does not exist in the members of the organism, whereas in the animal, each member is product and also productive. Insofar as we are to consider the process and the individuality of the earth, we are to regard it as a process which is past and which leaves its moments beyond the earth itself. This is an interesting question because he's claiming here that the earth he's setting the earth off against individual animals, and he's saying that the animals do this, and the earth doesn't do that. But how fine a line can you really draw between the earth as a living organism and the earth is only a backdrop? Because if you think about it, if you think about like the seed germ of life that exists on the planet, it couldn't exist if the earth wasn't hospitable to it in the first place. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And uh, I've read too many accounts where um, animal organisms required the earth to have certain environments, not just what we think of as temperate, but like there are organisms that live down in like volcanic sea vents, at thousands of degrees higher than we can live, right? And they depend on that uh, environment for their seed of life to continue and keep doing what it's doing. You know what I mean? Um, yeah, yeah, yes, thank you. Yeah, maintain. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um,
I think it
Interesting.
says because each aspect of the process corresponds to the propagation of the whole of the Earth is just sort of kind of has these processes that are kind of have their edges against each other, but they're not necessarily connecting in certain ways. Like they do, but they don't quite as like holistically. So that this is where we get to the point where there's that sense of organism that we see in a full animal,
Yeah,
just not quite as
and
holistic.
it's self-contained.
Correct. Well,
Yeah.
the Earth is kind of there to itself.
Um, the well, the ecologists talk about how the animal organism feeds back into the Earth system, and this is the big. It's not a debate among people who know how to read a fucking book, but right now the ruling class today is basically saying we don't want to deal with human ecological uh, contribution to collapse. We're just going to pretend it doesn't exist. But the fact that animal effect on the environment feeds back into the Earth system is part of why I look at this and I see the lines he's drawing, and I know why he's drawing them, but I'm not sure that they're as hard and fast as he
Oh,
seems to make it out here.
for me, I almost feel like this is kind of like it can like a lot of things. I feel like when it comes to dialectic, it's a spectrum. So like this is a spectrum where your connectivity between the parts are less kind of holistic compared to an animal, but it's still
Right.
within this spectrum, right, between completely detached and completely
Right.
encapsulated.
And And it's not like he's saying they're not connected. He's saying they're connected. The
Yeah.
philosophy of nature is the treatise on everything connecting all the way up from space to animal matter. Okay. And he organizes this according to the principle of logic that he set down in the first book. So and great. Um, I'm just, I'd just be interested in reading up more on what people make of this today, people who understand his philosophy. And unfortunately, not many people understand his philosophy, at least according to Harrison. Harrison basically told me that every commentator on Hegel today has it wrong, except for like these few people, including Hoolgate. And even Hoolgate doesn't have the whole picture because, hello, how can you? Totally. Um,
This
uh,
did remind me kind of like one thing from logic is he did have like remember the inner like theology from the inner teleology that the sense of purpose where
yeah.
the thing kind of creates itself, and that may be a line that's he's reflecting on here. It's not clear yet that he
Mhm.
is, or maybe that's defined later.
Well,
I mean,
if
within the logic of this of the nature.
yeah, if you think about how he positions the Earth as having come down from its position as a member of the solar, lunar, and cometary life throughout the universe, you know, um, it's subject to these forces, these laws of how physics works in the universe. And then the Earth gets to the certain place where it gets into that Goldilocks zone where life can, do its thing, so on and so forth. So, yeah, I'll be right back.
Okay. Process of formation that is not in the earth itself, simply because this is not a living subject.
Yeah.
Therefore, the earth does not come to be through to this process, as does living creature. It endures, it does not produce itself. For the same reason, the earth's members also endure. We already went all that, right? Okay. So, and when each member insofar as we are to consider the process and the individuality of the earth, we are to regard it as a process which is past, in which leaves its moments beyond the earth as self-substances. Yeah, I didn't read this part here. Now, that does not mean to say that the moon and comet, as also the immature and aging planets, those three earlier moments are empirical residues of the Earth process, which the Earth has thrown off, nor that the last mentioned moment, the aging planets, prefigure a state which will be reached in any given time by the Earth. On the contrary, as I understand Hegel and the matter, it means that the separate stages of the process which the Earth must be represented as having passed through, and having still to pass through, have their stereotype representation. Are we going to be talking about the planets in some form later here too? Yeah, and Jocelyn seeks to expand the process of conflict between elements. The difference of fire and water is volcanism maintains the Earth owes its shape, stratification, species of rocks, and so on to fire. On the other hand, Neptunism asserts equally one-sidedly that all is the result of the action of water. 40 years ago, I mean, there's a large part of this section I know we're going to skip over because it's just describing both principles we recognize in these as essential, but taken in isolation, they are one-sided and formal. Crystal, the earth, fire is still just as active as water and volcano springs and the meteorological processes generally. Like just trying to describe formation. When do we start getting to right here? Okay. Had to see when we can start skipping because it's just describing all the fossils they've been finding. How? Hmm. Besides must be distinguished in your process. Universal absolute process is the process of the idea, process in and for itself through which the earth is created and preserved. But the creation is eternal. It is not an event which once happened. It is an internal generation, where the infinite creative power of the idea is a perennial activity. We do not therefore see in nature the coming to be of the universal, that is, the universal side of nature has no history. The sciences, political constitutions, etc., on the other hand, have a history, for they are on the universal in the sphere of mind. Initially, I took that to be, oh, in some sense, this is kind of a prehistory because humanity is the one that became history, but I'm not so sure.
So apparently Haifa was hit today.
Oh, I still haven't seen the conclusion of the summary of whatever press release Trump was doing today.
Yeah.
Oh, the war is very complete. We got another mission accomplished thing going.
Oh yeah. Yeah, they keep
Right
saying
in
mission
line with
accomplished.
right in line with Iraq, but
Garbage.
yeah. What is it? The term idiot story?
Uh, I don't know.
I'm looking for it. I swear I shared it somewhere too. It's a literary criticism, idiot plot. In literary criticism, an idiot plot is one which kept in motion solely by the virtue of the fact that everybody involved is an idiot, and where the story would quickly end and possibly not even happen if this were not the case.
Yeah.
And it was in response to U.S. officials surprised by Iranian military response. Did not expect retaliatory strikes to be extensive or sustained.
And then of course they happen and they're like, "Oh my gosh, who could have seen this coming?" Really?
Yeah.
Uh,
All right. So let's go back a bit because I don't know if you heard some of what I was doing here. Oh, sorry. You were doing something.
yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I went over this a little bit more because, like, here again, we just summary, hey, we can't take. And this is the kind of funny thing. This is the thing I get a meta modernism when it comes to like a narrative in general, but it's like you can't just have one. Yeah, so the description of volcanism shaping things is one thing, and the Neptunism, which is, water processes, as another. You can't take them in their independence. They're all
Right.
each different aspects. And I think this, again, that's what that metamodernism seems to be, is a recognition that all these other aspects of viewpoints have their moments of truth, their moments of perceiving part of the whole. So
Yeah.
wait, I really need to finish that book.
Yeah, you keep coming back to it.
Yeah, because it seems like it's Hegelian in the end, even if it's not realizing it. Uh, Here, okay, three sides must be distinguished in the Earth's process. The universal of absolute process, the process of the idea, process in for itself, though, which the Earth is created and preserved, but the creation is eternal. It is not an event which once happened. It is an eternal generation, where the infinite creative power of the idea is a perennial activity. So yeah, the Earth isn't static; it constantly reshaped itself,
Yeah.
right? the terrestrial organism. We do not therefore see in nature the coming to be of the universal, that is, the universal side of nature has no history. The sciences, political constitution, etc., on the other hand, have a history, for they are the universal in the sphere of mind. I was thinking that in the sense that like the Earth kind of the history as we kind of have from these other stuff are history because we define it that way, while the Earth doesn't really define its history, even though we have a term natural history these days to distinguish it from human history. Does
Yeah.
that sound about right for you too? 'Cause I almost feel like maybe the universal side of nature, as in like forever, it's kind of hard to. I think
Yeah.
he meant it the other way, but I don't want to project my own concepts into that by accident.
So the universal side of nature, it's an eternal generation. I think
Mhm.
of the universe. The universe is always moving, and as it moves, it alters itself, it creates, it destroys,
Yeah.
right?
So,
You think on the cosmic scale, you know what I
right.
mean? And um it's one of these things where, you almost ask yourself, well, if the universe is alive, but it only creates like life as we know it once, right? Does it
Hmm.
really, does its process really generate um life itself, Because when I think of nature, I don't just think of its living variety, but also its so-called dead variety, because even its dead variety to us looks dead when really it's not, because it's, drawing a line between physics and biology is really kind of a losing game when you get down to the quantum level, but also the fact that, eventually bare siloed physics gives way to biology if the right configuration comes up. This is why I think that this is part of why I think you can't draw the lines we like to draw very easily between the geological earth and the living earth that generates life.
Like Kantian dualism.
Well, like people try,
Yeah.
and what you end up with is something like the understanding.
Right.
The understanding gives us basic knowledge that we can
Right.
work with day to day, but it isn't really all there is, or even how the world is really organized. But it's sort of the headspace that we've created with these sort of rough and dirty silos that don't actually exist, but they work for us in our knowledge systems, our rough knowledge systems, I guess you could say, you know. So yeah, since the process exists on the earth, but only in a general way, since it does not produce itself as subject. That's that's a questionable statement to me because the earth generates its own surface over time.
As
You know,
subject, though, I think is the specific difference. I'm trying to.
yeah. Like volcanoes,
Hmm.
plates, the earth didn't doesn't look today like it did 65 million years ago, right?
Yeah, I think the almost what it's I'm trying to figure out because again, this is the kind of like is it spectrum I'm trying to think here because it's is it creating itself for itself or is it just sort of itself a changing the changing process?
Well, the basis for the philosophy of nature is that um You go all the way back to the beginning where the absolute idea externalizes itself uh, in nature, right? Um, the the idea as a conscious in itself and for itself idea is not yet there because human thought is the idea for and in itself. Prior to that is how you get that definition. Like in space, on the Earth, where no human is, right? The idea is what he says external to itself. Um, I don't know. Uh, my brain's working overtime and it's not catching up.
We find fruit fans in general, i.e., the possibility which a living subject takes itself as an inanimate being. The process through which the earth makes itself to animate ground on the basis of living subject is a meteorological process. Oh, so yeah, we're looping back to the yeah, again, we went from the meteorological process being part of the essence to now being uh po presupposed in presuppo it being posited in the I keep trying to go the right direction, but no, I think I'm doing where the Earth presupposes the meteorological process. So now we're focused on the Earth side of the syllogism. And a bit. Yeah, I think the key phrase there is just literally as subject is the point
Hmm.
I'm trying to make there.
Yeah,
It's like the abstract version of the animal at this point. It is a process that's constantly creating itself, but it's not doing it at a sublated for itself level
yeah.
because there is no, as far as we know, Earth consciousness, and I don't see any reason why there would be. Okay. The C, the Earth must, uh, of course, be considered as having come to be and as passing away. Okay. Oh,
Keep going. Sorry.
okay, no worries. So give you a chance. The Earth must, of course, be considered as having come to be and as passing away, just as we read in the scriptures, heaven and earth shall pass away. Earth and the whole of nature are to be considered as product that is necessarily according to the notion. Next step, then, is the empirical demonstration of this determination in the constitution of the Earth. This is chiefly the subject matter of geogenosy. I'm part of keep on that, generation of the Earth. This that the Earth had a history, i.e., that its constitution is a result of successive changes. The direct evidence of this is in the Constitution itself. It points to a series of tremendous revolutions belonging to a remote past, in which probably also have a cosmic connection. In that the position of the Earth with also have a with regard to the angle made by the axis of its orbit could have been altered. At the surface of the Earth lie buried the flora and fauna of past world, alpha at great depth, beta in huge stratifications, gamma in localities where these species of animals and plants are now extinct. And now, if you want to discuss, move on, but at some point I recommend we skip quite a bit. He just describes all the findings. So we don't need to read that.
Right.
I think at this point, it's like the Earth almost, I guess he's pretty generic because he has no way no one really knew how the Earth was formed at this point.
Yeah.
But he does leave it open for a cosmic re relationship, which probably also have a cosmic connection. Yeah, so he's very aware of that.
Yeah.
Well, let me see down here. I'm curious, I still haven't read this part from the translation notes. The seeming contradiction in this here, the earth is maintained to be something that has come to be and will pass away, whereas a little while back it is supposed not to come to be but to be eternally created. This contradiction can be resolved if we recall what we said in the introduction about the eternity of the world, that it was said that through nature as a manifestation of the idea has eternally flowed from the latter's creative activity, yet the finite individual side of nature, owing to its positiveness and dependence on the idea, must also have come to be. And the notion of nature to be an idea is a form of otherness is implied the necessity for considering the earth too as having organized. Nonetheless, the empirical demonstration of this origination never got beyond showing that the earth owes its present constitution to a great upheaval, but not that the earth as this universal individual as such has originated. Okay.
Interesting.
So it's sort of at the time, there's still no lot metaphysical concepts here that the earth needed to have formed.
Mm.
Just the surface of the earth as we are on it now is part of a process. Okay.
Yeah.
Of course, now we can take this to be the earth comes into focus. Just yeah,
Yeah.
like I said, there's a lot of stuff here about them finding a whole bunch of like palm trees in areas that are like mountainous and stuff because of all that's well, what we know to be platonic plate tectonics. Platonic.
Platonic plate tectonics.
Yeah.
Say that 3 times fast.
No, I will not do that right now.
I think we put Jim to sleep. Jim,
Yep. Hey, Jim. All right.
I think Jim's out for the count.
Yeah.
We got 4 minutes left, so we could
Well,
call it.
let's figure it. Let me just jump down here to see what we want to talk about yet again. Skip past all that, and then right here, all of this, which belongs to fear. That's when we start getting back into the philosophical discussion, where I guess the kind of go over talks about just be to kind of how I'm trying to think how much of the understanding it is just to talk about taking the strata of rock as a description of time,
Mm,
but the implication of that, the immediate kind of differentiations actually makes that. Yeah, because like saying it's like, oh, in order to build a house, you have to have a ground floor and then a first floor, then a second floor. Yeah, that's the definition of a house.
yeah, exactly.
So he's saying, oh, but the striations, why they formed, etc., that makes this strata occur is important.
Yeah.
So and the sequences are deeper meaning. Yeah, that's what I was saying. And he is forget where does he say that? Like it's oh, on the one side, therefore, the history of the Earth is an empirical matter. On the other, a reasoning from empirical data. And so I think that's the key difference he's making. Okay, disconnected. It's not just to describe the history of the Earth as you see it, but to interpret it correctly,
Yeah.
which is we are way much better at today. God, I just remembering that it hasn't even been a century yet since they discovered the actual parting of the Atlantic Ocean, where we're having a bunch of uplift from the
Hmm.
mantle. So plate tectonics has been proven for less than a century.
Yeah.
That's I forgot about that. And like I was in school when the pictures of the planets were already in my books. because we're right at that age, but it was not until like the late 70s, early 80s that the pictures were taken. Man,
Yeah.
these things move fast. Yeah, okay. And then there's a
Can you
whole second.
imagine if plate tectonics worked any faster than it actually did? Like,
I
like
mean, it
I, I don't
it's
think we would have. I don't think we would have even evolved,
yeah. Although
right?
you can witness moments like that,
There's
they're
a
moments.
well, yeah. Well, it's
There we are.
it's one of those Lenin things where, you know, days where uh
Decades where nothing happens, and
yeah,
then weeks where decades happen.
yes, exactly. And
Of course, Gino. Go
it's
ahead.
those leaps. It's those leaps. Like
Yeah.
look at Mount St. Helens. I mean, no movement whatsoever, and then the thing explodes, right? And
Yep.
so you have your turnover into quality, whereas before it was just quantity, right? And
Hmm.
so I forget what my point was, but like if there's a Star Trek episode, I think it's like in the second season where they come across this star system where the planets, quote, live fast and die hard. And you find this sentient civilization on one of the planets, and the planet is about to go, you know, tits up in terms of its volcanic activity. And I'm sitting here like, at the time it seems like a good premise, but really if if volcanics on that planet were that volatile all the time, like that would give you a really narrow, stable era to actually evolve stable life, right?
Right. This
Like
spends like a lot of
I don't
maybe.
think those sentient people would be there,
Let's keep
right?
it. I mean, at the same time, that's what the whole fine-tuned paradox in science comes from. It's like it just everything just seems to be aligned for people like us to exist. But the question is that backwards theologically?
I mean, I don't know. I
We
mean, like,
exist because we are the kind of beings that would exist in this creation, in this with that configuration.
right, because if you think of how varietous the universe is from beginning to end, like how common are we? Is a Star Trek universe really
Yeah, that
uh the standard, or is that just our hubris talking? You know,
or
it,
hope. Yeah,
yeah, our hope, our that life on another planet. I remember another Star Trek episode where they come across these like rocks in a cave that just sort of crawl and kill uh, people or whatever.
yeah. Although I think what is it, at least the good thing about modern era Star Trek, excluding the fact that cartoons are easier to make too, is you can use CG to make these less human characters.
Yeah, but I mean, most of them are bipeds still. Like what's to
Well,
say that it'll even be biped? Like
the
we're the only biped on the face of the earth, right? How
well,
many
there are
bipeds
like
are?
whale-like creatures.
Oh, I know. But I'm
Okay,
just,
yeah,
but I'm
majority
just
of them.
saying, when you zoom out to the entire universe, considering how uncommon on the Earth we are and how long we took to cook, you know, literally, tens of thousands of years, like how many bipedal, somewhat humanoid-looking species could there be in the universe? And what are the chances that they be close enough to each other to be able to interact? You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Because like our the speed of light is the limiting factor to get to the next star system. If we had if we had access to the speed of light or multiples of it, which, you know, you get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's 9:03.
Yeah, that's all right. Yeah, I'll put down where we got left off because I have that. Also,
Okay.